Time is more important than price. When time is up, price will reverse. Now, it goes without saying that the time was up at those last two major extremes, but the question remains is how do we know when time is up and if we're seeing a major bottom? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be covering in this video. But this is where it gets biblical. What some of you may not be aware of is that W.D. Gann was a very religious person, and he used things that he studied from the Bible and applied it to the markets to get some incredible results. And just a little bit of what he learned from the Bible is what I'm going to share with you in this video. Now, I'm not a traditionally religious person, but I can respect and appreciate that the biblical texts have a lot of timeless knowledge and wisdom contained within them. But Gann's genius is how he applied this stuff to the financial markets, and it is still applicable today, even in Bitcoin, a market that did not exist from his time. So in this video, I will be covering some time analysis, some stuff that I've shared with you before, but also introducing to you a couple of new concepts. Now, please remember that I'm not a financial advisor. Past results are not indicative of future performance, and you must always do your own due diligence and research before making any financial position. Okay, before we get to the biblical stuff, I do want to start out with this chart here, which I have covered for you guys many times before, but it's about time that I bring it up to date. Now, this is the BLX chart where we are looking at crypto's entire history, and the numbers on the chart represent timeframes. We have days up in the cycle and days down in the cycle, and we can start to draw some relationships between these numbers to give us an insight into what might be around the corner. Many of you will recall how we got very close to calling the exact bottom of the bear market because the time frame was very similar to the previous bear markets, lasting around 1 year, give or take a couple of months. But we also use some other analysis to get a little bit closer, but here we're just focusing on time. When it comes to the bull market lengths, you can see how they've all been remarkably similar, around 1100 days, and the current cycle is only 791 days old. So this is well outside the norm for how long a bull market should last. But remember, nothing has to work all the time. It is just one of these things where we're trying to get the odds or probability in our favor, and looking at the bull market lengths, it would still suggest there's still some more time to go, but price, of course, has to follow suit and actually print those new highs. But we can also get a little bit more granular with this information and pull apart shorter term timeframes. Something I've been sharing with you guys for a very long time now is to expect a longer correction after breaking into new all-time highs. A correction lasting around 1 to 3 months, but of course it could blow past that a little bit further. That's what these orange circles are pointing at. We have 88 days, 34 days and 69 days, and these long-lasting time corrections all came about after breaking back into new all-time high territory. What we're seeing in this cycle here is a little bit different because we did technically break into new all-time highs, but we did not hold above that level. What we've seen over the last few months is that clean breakout, and we are now within that correction time frame of around 1 to 3 months, measured from the peak to the trough. Now you can see two numbers here. I have 50 days and also 84 days, and this is because I'm using two time frames. One is for Bitcoin and the other is for the total market cap, which did top out at slightly different times. But looking at what previous cycles had done with those breaks into all-time highs and those long-lasting time corrections, there is a good chance that what we're seeing now is the same thing playing out as those previous cycles, and we're just getting that longer-lasting time correction, which is throwing a lot of people off their game. When it comes to price, the current Bitcoin correction is only 30%. You can see that here in red, and when we look at all of the corrections in this bull market, it averages out to being only 25%, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things, especially an asset class which puts in such high levels of volatility and moves in such great percentages. An average correction of 25% so far is still relatively healthy. Something else that I've been discussing for a couple of years is also how I believe this cycle is mimicking most closely cycle 2. So the fact that we're seeing relatively balanced corrections so far should not come as a surprise because we saw something similar in that cycle. Now the corrections were larger, granted, but we did see very similar numbers for the entire bull market. And what we're seeing in this bull market so far is once again very similar numbers, all ranging between around 20 to 34%. But to bring it back to the time analysis, what we have seen in this cycle here is the fact that it's been running much faster than previous cycles. Technically speaking, we did get that new all-time high very early at only 67 weeks compared to the previous cycles, which took around 103 weeks and also 102 weeks. Now, these timeframes here are measured from the bear market bottom to when we actually broke back into new all-time highs. And once again, it was 103 weeks from bear market bottom to new all-time highs in the cycle 2, and in cycle 3 it was 102 weeks from the bear market bottom to that new cycle high. So while the current cycle, the mainstream adoption cycle, did only take 67 weeks, time actually ended up balancing out to get back on track with those previous cycles. The market went dead for 144 days, and then when we got that break back into new all-time highs, it was actually 103 weeks, almost to the day, which brings the cycle back in line with what we were expecting. But it doesn't end there, because the current cycle has continued to run faster than previous cycles. Measuring again from the bear market bottom to the peak, it took 113 weeks before getting this large correction, the second largest correction in the bull market so far. If we look at something similar from the previous cycles, it took around 121 weeks from bear market bottom to that major top, which certainly scared a lot of people in the market cycle at the time. And we go back to the cycle before, it was around 125 weeks from the bear market bottom to that major top. Now, it may not look like much, but that was most certainly a savage sell-off and a big correction. I think it was around 40%. So when we're looking at like for like, it's definitely comparable to what we're seeing now. But keeping time in mind, this cycle has yet again run much faster than the previous cycles. So there is an increasing chance that what we're seeing now is a rebalancing of time before the market gets back on track. Now, just to recap some time and also price before we get biblical, timeframes are still on track and we're yet to see any major confirmation that the cycle has come to an end. When it comes to Bitcoin, it's still trading above major tops. Timeframes are still suggesting it's a bit too early to get a major top, and the price corrections are still balanced and measured compared to what the cycle has done before. Now, in terms of confirmation signals and what I'd like to see to confirm a major bottom, I covered that at length in yesterday's video. So do go back and watch that video from yesterday where I talk about a couple of paths forward as to what the market could be doing next. But keep in mind, you never want to be standing like a deer in the headlights, and you have to have a plan for no matter what the market does, because the market will do just enough to fool most of the people most of the time. So always have validation and invalidation levels so you can keep on your A game and not get too surprised by whatever the market does. Now we can get biblical and look at time in a slightly different light. Now, you're going to have to keep an open mind and you don't have to be religious to accept this, but do let me know in the comments below what you think about this style of analysis and if you do believe there's actually wisdom contained within the religious texts. Now, what we're going to be doing is pulling apart the time frames, the major time frames over the last 12 months. We have the very important peak from March of last year, which led to a correction lasting exactly 144 days. I'm not rounding here and I'm not looking at give or take a day or two, we're looking at exact figures. Now, after 144 days from peak down to trough, the time was certainly up and price reversed exactly like Gann said it does when the time frames come to an end. Now, you can use foresight with this stuff. It's not done in hindsight. And we did share with members of the Investor Accelerator ahead of time this time frame to be tracking and how it could lead to a market reversal. But to get the point across in this lesson, of course, we have to use a little bit of hindsight here because that market action is history. It's done and dusted, but we can learn a few things moving forward, which is what I hope to open your mind to. Now, since the major low from August of last year, the price has rallied 168 days. Again, this is an exact time frame from trough to peak. I'm not rounding here and I'm not looking at give or take any days, 168 days from bottom to top. And this is another time frame where time was clearly up and price reversed. The market did not want to go any higher after traveling that length of time. We did see a change in trend and of course the market breakdown. Now, why does this matter at all and how is it biblical? That's where it comes to these Bible verses down below. I'll read them to you and I'll tell you how I interpret them, or at least how Gann interpreted them, and how we can use this in the markets today. First, we have Exodus 20:11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. And then we have Peter below in these verses here that says, but do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. Now, I can accept that this is very open to interpretation, and I may even lose a few followers by talking about this stuff online, but stick with me here and I'll show you how we can pull this apart in the markets. Now, we'll start with the second verse first and how it ties into the first verse that I shared with you. Gann interpreted the second verse a bit like they do in numerology, but more explicitly, just considering that one day is equal to 1 week, it's equal to 1 year, etc., etc. And you can also do this with time frames in the market to expect changes in trend. And that brings us to the Exodus verse, paying attention to 6 days and also the 7th day. Now, if you think about how many hours there are in the day, there are 24 hours in the day. And if we multiply 24 by 6 days, that equals 144 hours. But for the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years. That means 144 hours can also equal 144 days. That's where the relationships come from. And then if you also think about 24 hours over 7 days, that equals 168 hours. And again, 168 hours is the same as 168 days, at least interpreting the Bible in this way. But the thing that I love about this is that you don't have to leave it open to interpretation. You can test this stuff and get objective data. And this is just scratching the surface with what the Bible says and how it can be applied in the market. But you can see here how with exact precision, interpreting in this way has of course led to some pretty staggering results. Now, if it was the only time that this has ever happened, then I wouldn't be too impressed, but I'll leave you with some homework to go away and pull apart some different time frames, specifically 144 and 168, to see what it does in the market that you're tracking. Now, of course, nothing works all of the time, because if it worked all the time, it would cease to exist because everybody would catch on. That's just the nature of the game. But what does this tell us with the current decline and if time is actually up? Well, this is where we can start to pull apart some other things that I've shared with you on the channel, specifically 50% levels. Now, we know 50% in terms of price, we can start to expect buyers to step into the market when the market is correcting or falling into that zone. Now, I'll recreate this for you so you can see what the market was doing based on this 50% level, coming from peak down to trough, and we already had this price point on our chart ahead of time. So when the market fell into it, we're expecting buying pressure to pick up on our halfway point at just beneath $80,000. Now, when it comes to time, we can do the same thing. We already knew to be tracking 144 days and 168 days based on our biblical interpretation, but we can also do the same thing in terms of time on the way down. What's half of 168? You guessed it, 84 days. So what we're seeing here is support come in on 50% of price and also time, and the market rallying away from this zone. Now, so far that's worked really well over the last few weeks, but it doesn't mean it has to be the final low and the market has to put in new all-time highs from here. There's no point dealing with definitives in the market because there's no such thing as certainty. But what this did tell us on the day was to be looking for buyers to step in and for the trend to reverse. And how big that reversal is going to be, of course, remains to be seen. And in terms of higher time frame confirmation, I've shared with you many times before what I am tracking, but for the short to intermediate term, we've seen a nice bounce away from our time and price support. Now, if time analysis does interest you, along with other things I've discussed on the channel, I have 2 dedicated time masterclasses in TIA Premium. Shameless plug, we have a sale going on right now. So take a look at the link in the description below where you can get your hands on all of these advanced masterclasses along with everything else we do offer in our TIA Premium membership. So take a look at the link in the description below where you can learn more about that. But with time and price coming together at a major bottom just a few weeks ago, whether or not this low holds is extremely important. But what we can also use with our biblical timeframes is that if we do break down from here, we can start to anticipate perhaps a 144-day correction from peak down to the new trough, wherever it does come, which is when time may just be up again and we can start to expect support and buyers to re-enter. So I've thrown a lot at you in this video and covered some more esoteric concepts when it comes to Gann analysis and time analysis. So do let me know what you think in the comments below. But that's all I've got for you in today's market update. Wishing you more health, wealth, and happiness. And until next time, I'll catch you then.